boys and girls. It was great seeing you today. I'm going to be reading chapters 14 and 15. Cross my fingers, nobody makes any noise. So let's hope. Okay, chapter 14, Mr. Willy Wonka. Mr. Wonka was standing all alone just inside the open gates of the factory. And what an extraordinary little man he was. He had a black top hat on his head. He wore a tailcoat made out of beautiful plum-colored velvet. His trousers were bottle green. His gloves were pearly gray. And in one hand, he carried a fine gold-topped walking cane. Covering his chin, there was a small, neat, pointed black beard, a goatee. And his eyes were the most marvelously bright. They seemed to be sparkling and twinkling at you all the time. The whole face, in fact, was alight with fun and laughter. And oh, how clever he looked, how quick and sharp and full of life. He kept making quick, jerky little movements with his head, cocking it this way and that way, and taking everything in with those bright, twinkling eyes. He was like a squirrel in the quickness of his movements, like a quick, clever old squirrel from the park. Suddenly, he did a different, funny little skipping dance in the snow, and he spread his arms wide. And he smiled at the 5 children who were clustered near the gates, and he called out, "Welcome, my little friend. Welcome to the factory." His voice was high and fluty. "Will you come forward one at a time, please?" he called out. "And bring your parents. Then show me your golden ticket and give me your name. Who's first?" The big fat boy stepped up. "I'm Augustus Glump," he said. "Augustus!" cried Mr. Wonka, seizing his hand and pumping it up and down with terrific voice. "My dear boy, how good to see you. Delighted, charmed, overjoyed to have you with us. And these are your parents? How nice. Come in. That's right, step right through the gates." Mr. Wonka was clearly just as excited as everybody else. "My name," said the next child to go forward, "is Veruca Salt." "My dear Veruca, how are you? What a pleasure this is. You do have an interesting name, don't you? I always thought that a Veruca was a sort of wart that you got on the sole of your foot. But I must be wrong, mustn't I? How pretty you look in that lovely mean coat. I'm so glad you came. Dear me, this is going to be such an exciting day. I do hope you enjoy it. I'm sure you will. I know you will. Your father? How are you, Mr. Salt? And Mrs. Salt? Overjoyed to see you. Yes, the ticket is quite in order. Please go in." The next 2 children, Violet Beauregard and Mike TV, came forward to have their tickets examined and then to have their arms practically pumped up their shoulders by the energetic Mr. Wonka. And at last, a small, nervous voice whispered, "Charlie Bucket." "Charlie!" cried Mr. Wonka. Well. So there you are. You're the one who found your golden ticket only yesterday, aren't you? Yes. I read all about it in the morning papers. Just in time, my dear boy. I'm so glad. So happy for you. And this? Your grandfather? Delighted to meet you, sir. Overjoyed, enraptured, enchanted. All right. Excellent. Is everybody in now? 5 children? Yes. Good. Now will you please follow me? Our tour is about to begin. But do keep together. Please don't wander off by yourselves. I shouldn't like to lose any of you at this side of the stage of the proceedings. Oh, dear me, no. Charlie glanced back over his shoulder and saw a great iron entrance gate slowly closing behind him. The crowds on the outside were still pushing and shouting. Charlie took a last look at them. Then, as the gates closed with a clang, all sight of the outside world disappeared. "Here we are," cried Mr. Wonka, trotting along in front of the group. "Through the big red door, please. That's right. It's nice and warm inside. I have to keep it warm inside the factory because of the workers. My workers are used to the extremely hot climate. They can't stand the cold. They'd perish if they went outside in the weather. They would freeze to death." Who are these workers? Asked Augustus Glump. All in good time, dear boy, said Mr. Wonka, smiling at Augustus. Be patient. You shall see everything as we go along. Are all of you inside? Good. Would you mind closing the door? Thank you. Charlie Bucket found himself standing in a line corridor that stretched away in front of him as far as he could see. The corridor was so wide that a car could easily have been driven along it. The walls were pale pink. The lighting was soft and pleasant. How lovely and warm, whispered Charlie. I know. What a marvelous smell, answered Grandpa Joe, taking a long, deep sniff. All the most wonderful smells in the world seemed to be mixed up in the air all around them. The smell of roasting coffee and burnt sugar and melting chocolate and mint and violets and crushed hazelnuts and apple blossom and caramel and lemon pie, and as far away as in the distance, from the heart of the great factory, came a muffled roar of energy as though some monstrous, gigantic machine was spinning its wheels at the breakneck speed. Now this, my dear children, said Mr. Wonka, raising his voice above the noise, is the main corridor. Will you please hang your coats and hats in those pegs over there, and then follow me? That's the way. Good. Everyone ready? Come on. Here we go. He trotted off rapidly down the corridor with the tails of his plum-colored velvet coat flapping behind him, and the visitors all hurried after him. It was quite a large party of people. When you came to think about it, there were 9 grown-ups and 5 children, 14 in all. So you can imagine that there was a good deal of pushing and shoving as they hustled and bustled down the passage, trying to keep up with the swift little figure in front of them. Come on, cried Mr. Wonka. Get a move, please. We'll never get around to today if you dawdle like this. Soon he turned right off the main corridor into another slightly narrower passage. Then he turned left, then left again, then right, then left, then right, then right, then left. The place was like a gigantic rabbit warren, with passages leading this way and in that way in every direction. Don't you let go of my hand, whispered Grandpa Joe to Charlie. Notice how all these passages are sloping downwards, called Mr. Wonka. We are now going underground. All of the most important rooms in the factory are deep below the surface. What is that? Somebody answered. That wouldn't be nearly enough space for them up on top, answered Mr. Wonka. These rooms we are going to see are enormous. They're larger than football fields. No building in the world would be big enough to house them. But down here, underneath the ground, I've got all the space I want. There's no limit, so long as I hollow it out. Mr. Wonka turned right. He turned left, and then he turned right again. The passages were sloping steeper and steeper now downhill. Then suddenly, Mr. Wonka stopped. In front of him, there was a shiny metal door. The party crowded round. On the door, in large letters, it said, The Chocolate Room. Chapter 15, The Chocolate Room. An important room this is, cried Mr. Wonka, taking a bunch of keys from his pocket and slipping one into a keyhole of the door. This is the nerve center of the whole factory, the heart of the whole business, and so beautiful. I insist upon my rooms being beautiful. I can't abide ugliness in factories. In we go then. But do be careful, my dear children. Don't lose your heads. Don't get overexcited. Keep very calm. Mr. Wonka opened the door. 5 children and 9 grown-ups pushed their ways in. And oh, what an amazing sight it was now to meet their eyes. They were looking down upon a lovely valley. There were green meadows on either side of the valley, and along the bottom of it there flowed a green-brown river, a great brown river. What is more, there was a tremendous waterfall halfway along the river, a steep cliff over which the water curled and rolled in a solid sheet, and then went crashing down into a boiling, churning whirlpool of froth and spray. Below the waterfall, and this was the most astonishing sight of all, a whole mass of enormous glass pipes were dangling down the river from somewhere high up the ceiling. They were really enormous, those pipes. There must have been a dozen of them at least, and they were sucking up the brownish muddy water from the river and carrying it away to goodness knows where. And because they were made of glass, you could see the liquid flowing and bubbling along inside them. And above the noise of the waterfall, you could hear the never-ending sucking sound of the pipes as they did their work. Graceful trees and bushes were growing along the riverbanks. Weeping willows and alders and tall clumps of rhododendrons with their pink and red and mauve blossoms. Rhododendrons. In the meadows, there were thousands of buttercups. There! Cried Mr. Wonka, dancing up and down and pointing his gold-topped cane at the great brown river. It's all chocolate. Every drop of the river is hot melted chocolate of the finest quality. The very finest quality. There's enough chocolate in there to fill every bathtub in the entire country. And all of the swimming pools as well. Isn't it terrific? And just look at my pipes. They suck up the chocolate and carry it all the way to the other rooms in the factory where it is needed. Thousands of gallons an hour, my dear children. Thousands and thousands of gallons. The children and their parents were too flabbergasted to speak. They were staggered. They were dumbfounded. They were bewildered and dazzled. They were completely bowled over the hugeness of the whole thing. They simply stood and stared. The waterfall is most important, Mr. Wonka went on. It mixes the chocolate. It churns it up. It pounds it and beats it. It makes it light and frothy. No other factory in the world mixes its chocolate by waterfall, but it's the only way to do it properly. The only way. And do you like my trees? He cried, pointing to his stick. And my lovely bushes? Don't you think they look pretty? I told you I hated ugliness. And of course, they are all edible and made of something different and delicious. And do you like my meadows? Do you like my grass and my buttercups? The grass you are standing on, my dear little ones, is made of a new kind of soft, minty sugar that I've just invented. I call it sludge. Try a blade, please do. It's delectable. Automatically, everyone bent down and picked up the blade of grass. Everyone, that is, except Augustus Glump, who took a big handful. And Violet Beauregarde, before tasting her blade of grass, took the piece of world record-breaking chewing gum out of her mouth and stuck it behind her ear. Isn't it wonderful? Whispered Charlie. Hasn't it gotten a wonderful taste, Grandpa? I could eat the whole field, said Grandpa Joe, grinning with delight. I could go around on all fours like a cow and eat every blade of grass in the field. Try a buttercup, cried Mr. Wonka. They're even nicer. Suddenly, the air was filled with screams of excitement. The screams came from Veruca Salt. She was pointing frantically to the other side of the river. Look over there, she screamed. What is it? He's moving. He's walking. It's a little person. It's a little man down there below the waterfall. Everybody stopped picking buttercups and stared across the river. She's right, Grandpa, cried Charlie. It is a little man. Can't you see him? I see him, Charlie, said Grandpa Joe excitedly. And now everyone started shouting at once. There's two of them. My gosh, so there is. There's more than two. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What are they doing? Where do they come from? Who are they? Children and parents alike rushed down to the edge of the river to get a closer look. Aren't they fantastic? No higher than my knee. Look at their funny long hair. The tiny men, they were no larger than medium-sized dolls, had stopped what they were doing, and now they were staring back across the river at the visitors. One of them pointed towards the children, and then he whispered something to the other 4, and all 5 of them burst into peals of laughter. But they can't be real people, Charlie said. Of course they're real people, Mr. Wonka answered. They're Oompa Loompas. So next chapter will be the Oompa Loompa.